And to continue our journey to build the provisioning project, cloud infrastructure, specifically for Microsoft Azure in this particular project, to basically provision infrastructure components, Azure resources, for a simple ASP.NET Core application with a database attached to it. And in the last time, we talked a little bit about finalizing all the brokers, including configuration brokers and logging brokers, that will basically help us build the rest of our project. So we went in the back here and basically said, okay, so this is my provision project. I have the cloud broker that was done. I have the configuration broker, and I have my logging broker right here. Today, we're going to start actually doing a little bit of more serious stuff. What do you think about that, Sally? Are you ready to do serious stuff? So we're going to be building the services side. So here's services. And under services, I'm creating foundation services. There's foundations. And then under foundations, I'm creating a service called cloud management service. Okay, so this is, let's call it cloud managements because it's a plural. It's not necessarily on the English side of things. It's more like the programming side of things. If it's a namespace, you're gonna make it plural one way or another. Okay, so let's go ahead and create. So this service here, this foundation service is gonna basically help us kind of massage, whatever the broker is exposing for us. It's gonna expose. It's going to help us kind of, if you pass in a project name, I want to be able to go and say, okay, this project name is going to be in this particular naming convention. And we're going to take those one by one, slowly but surely, so you just understand, where we're coming from. And feel free to ask questions as needed. Okay, so I'm going to start with an interface here. I'm just going to call it iCloud Management Service. Just a very simple service there. And this cloud management service will basically expose a bunch of APIs for a processing service that's a little bit upstream from there. So let me zoom in a little bit because that's where all the magic is going to happen. So what do I need here? I need a bunch of functionality in here. Let's start with, from the very top, I want a resource group. Remember, Sally, that's the first thing that we want to be able to establish. So I'm going to go here and say value task. And I'm going to go and say, give me the iResource group. And this resource group is basically going to help me basically create the bag where I'm going to, add in all my components. So I'm going to provision resource group async like this. And I'm passing into the resource group the project name. This guy is very important. Do you remember where we get that project name from? Do you remember?
Yes.
Where do we get that? Good.
You put it on app setting?
From app settings, exactly. All right, great. You're still with me from this guy, right? So, so that's where we get that project from. And then in here, we're gonna get something called environment. And the environment, remember how we talked yesterday about having a div environment and then staging or UAT environment, and then having a production environment. So for every environment, we make one call to one of these methods. Okay. Okay, so that's the interface. Let's go implement that interface. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to go and make a class. I'm going to say cloud management service right here. And this guy is going to have the copyrights for, this is the coalition. If you want to build something for the world, join me. I'm calling upon you. Okay, so there's this implementation here, like this. And then in here, I want to be basically, as you may expect, I'm going to call my broker, right? My cloud broker, right? To go do that stuff for me. So do you remember we had, this is public in here. I'm going to go here and say private read only iCloud broker. That's the guy that knows how to communicate with the cloud and do all the magic behind the scene. Also, I want to be able to call the logging broker in here so I can log events that are happening in my system. I'm gonna do control period or control dot in here, and then I can now easily basically assign things. Unlike the dependency injection approach, we're not gonna do that in here because it's just a program. So I'm just gonna go ahead and say new cloud broker like this. And in here, I'm gonna do the same thing, new logging broker, because there is no startup. I'm not doing an IOC or anything. It's just a very simple approach to kind of organize our code so we know how to make it familiar for people to work with. Okay, we want to build a a resource group, right? So let's start like this. From the resource group, first of all, I want to know what my resource group name is. Resource group name, right? My resource group name is going to be the project name, which was passed into me. Project name, like this. And then I'm going to do dash, and I'm going to say resources. Sources. This is just a naming convention. And then dash in here, and then I'm going to say environment. And I'm going to set all of this to uppercase. That's the first step. So for instance, if it's SFEE core, it would be SFEE. Hold on, it would be something like this. It will be SFEE.core API resources dev, like this, right? And then if I'm creating multiple environment, it would be UAT. It would be prod, like this, right? Let's say we want to scale up a little bit and make it a geolocation, geo-redundant location. You can go and say, you can say prod US West, like this. You can say prod Europe or Europe, like this, right? You can say prod, whatever the case may be. So see how it scales from a smaller application to a larger application. So this is the resource group name. Great. Now, we want to go and tell the world what we're doing. So this is my logging broker log activity. And then I'm going to go and say a message in here. And I'm going to say provisioning, like this. And then this is my resource group right here. So what is this $sign that I put in there? It helps me kind of interpolate the data that's coming in. So I'm passing in the data inside of a string. Okay. So now once that's done, I can now go and call my broker resource group. This is my resource group right here. And I can go here and say await this .cloud broker .provision create resource group async, right? And this resource group wants what? It just wants the resource group name, which we're going to give it to. A little bit too long as a line. Let's break it by one. Okay. That's my resource group. And then I can go down here and say this .logging broker .log activity message, like this, and say, excuse me, and say resource group name provisioned successfully. And the last thing, I want to just return that resource group. So why do you think I want to return this resource group? Because I'm going to use that to add in more things to it. So I need the reference to that resource group, right? So I need to have a reference. So remember how when we did the broker here, if you go and create, for instance, a plan will tell you what resource group you want me to put that plan item into. If you go create an app service, it'll say what resource group. See, all these guys want a resource group. See, all of them want a resource group, except for the SQL database. Why is that? Because the SQL database lives inside of a SQL server, not inside of a resource group. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so that's that first part, provisioning resource group async. Okay, so let's commit that one. So this here, foundations, implement, provisioning, resource group, done. What's the next one? Right after that, we need a plan. We need to create a plan. So let's go right back into the interface in here, and we're gonna go to the interface and say, I wanna create a plan. Let's go here and say value task. IApp service plan, I think. And then I can go here and say provision, right? Plan async. What does the plan take? It takes in a project name, it takes in an environment, and it takes in resource group. See, that's the guy that we just created. Perfect. Okay, let's go back to this guy who's going to be sad because we didn't implement this feature. I'm going to do control period. It's going to create this for me. It's always nice to match the implementation with the order of the chronological order of creating things and how things are being called. Make sure that there's some thoughtfulness being done in the code itself. Like if someone looks at the code, say, yeah, I expect that order to match, the order of which, the interface was defined. It helps a lot with so many different things. Okay. So this is me provisioning a plan. I want to be able to go and say, I want to create a plan in here. So this is all my stuff. And then just like the other one, I'm going to go here and say string plan name, right? And then I'm going to go here and say plan name dash plan dash environment like this. And then I'm going to go and say to upper. That's my plan name. Perfect. Sorry, did I say project name? It should be plan name. Sorry, that's hold on. Yeah, that guy goes in here. There you go. Project name, plan. There you go. What do we do next? Now you're probably reading it. You know, we're gonna go and say, you know, message, right? And then provisioning, right? And then you got the plan name in there, like this. And then, you know, dot, 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 like that. So now this is you reporting in the build that you're provisioning this plan name. The same thing, app service plan, like this, and I can go say this is my plan, and then I'm going to go down here and say await this dot cloud broker, and then create plan, like this. And the create plan wants what? It wants a plan name, and it wants the resource group that we passed in, which is this guy. Perfect. Now that I have my plan, I can go back here and say this dot logging broker dot log activity, and I can go like this and say message here, and then I'm going to say that the plan has been provisioned like this. Now I can go back and return what? The plan. See that consistent pattern that's happening? That's exactly the pattern that we're following, right? That makes things a lot easier and much more predictable. That's predictable code.
Mhm.
Okay, so we done this one. Let's go back here and say foundations, implement provisioning, app service plan. All right, let's pick up another one. Let's go back into the interface like this. And let's go pick up, let's say we could start with storage. Yeah, we could, or we could build the app service. Either way, I think storage is okay. Let's start with the server and then the database. How about that? So I'm gonna go here and say value task and then iSQL server like this. And then I'm going to go and say provision SQL Server SQL Server Async. And the SQL Server, as you may expect, takes project name. It takes, let's go here, project name. It takes environment. And it takes what? The resource group. This is my resource group right here. See how they're consistent? They're very predictable and consistent, and the changes are not sudden. They're not like not scary. You know, you're just going and saying, oh, I can easily predict what the next step is going to be based on how we built previous things, right? So let's go here. There we go. Here we go. And then the exact same thing. I want to go here and say, this is my SQL Server. SQL Server is just a tiny bit different when it comes to naming convention.
Mhm.
So with SQL Server, we're gonna just call it a little bit different. So I'm gonna go here and say string SQL Server name equal. Here's a $sign, and then the project name, then dash DB server, right? And then I'm gonna add in the environment like this, and then I'm gonna go and say dot to lower. Why to lower? That's just Azure restrictions that you can't have uppercase for SQL servers for some reason. I don't know if that changed, but here we are. Okay. And then this dot login broker log activity message like this. And I'm going to go and say provisioning the SQL Server name. Okay. As you may expect, SQL Server. Here's my SQL Server. Here's my await. Oops. Await this dot. Let's take that guy to the next line. Await this dot cloud broker dot create SQL server async, and that guy wants the SQL server name, and it wants the resource group. Easy, just like that. Done. Now what? Now I go here and say logging broker, right? And then log activity and say message. And there is your SQL server. Need the SQL server provisioned. Done. Now what? Return that SQL server so we can add databases in it. Done. Let's go here and do a commit. And let's say foundations, provision, SQL server. Great. All right, so far so good, right? So let's go down here and let's go back. Yeah, let's go back to provisioning the database. That's gonna go inside that server, right? So value task, and then SQL database. So ideally, this guy would return an iSQL database, but I'm going to intentionally return a SQL database because I want to share the connection string with an app service. So before I do that, I'm gonna go down to the models in here. And then let's go into the maybe in storages. I don't know if I created storages in here. This is cloud management. Yeah, there's storages right here, and then there's SQL Server Access. I'm gonna create a new one in here that's called SQL Database. And I'll tell you why is that in a second. So this is SQL Database. This SQL Database will carry two things for me that I can really use. The connection string of the SQL database, which is what the app service is going to need to be able to connect to the database. So here's prop string connection string like this. And then there is the guy that comes actually from the servers, which is iSQL database. This guy right here. It's not easy to get the connection string from this guy, so we have to do a little bit of maneuvering in here. Okay, Control KE done. So now I'm gonna go back to my interface and I say this guy returns a SQL database, just like this. And this SQL database guy, as you may expect, it wants to have the whatchamacallit. We want to say provision SQL database async, and this guy will take project name. It will take environment like this, and it will also need to take what? Should we pass in the resource group to this?
No, server.
The SQL server, right? SQL server. There you go. That's all it needs, but its implementation is going to be a little bit different. If you do Control MO, it will collapse these for you, so you can see the rest of the file. So control period here, control dot, and let me break down these environments this way, like this. And now let's go about implementing this guy. Now, part of this is going to be very straightforward, just like we did before, but the other part will be a little bit different when we're building that SQL database connection string. Let me show you. Let's just start like this. So I'm going to start with string SQL database name, and then I'm going to go up in here and say, give me the project name, right? -db environment, and you may end up creating multiple databases. Again, the solution is for a simple SQL server, but you're free to expand on that. And then log activity is your message. Here is provisioning, and then the SQL database name. And here's a 3 dot, like this. And then I want to call the database. So this guy returned iSQL database because that's the native model. And I'm gonna go here and say await this dot cloud broker dot create SQL database. What does this guy take? It takes a SQL database name and it needs the SQL server. There it is, SQL server, done. Not really done. We still need to give it back the connection string, right? So I can go down here and say this dot logging broker like this dot logging broker dot log activity message. And I can go here and say SQL database name provisioned like this. This is done. But I need to return a new model here because it's asking me to return a SQL database, right? So in here, I'm going to go and say return SQL database. And this SQL database has requirements. It needs a database, which is easy. That's the SQL database that came back. But it also wants a connection string. So where the heck are we going to get that connection string from? Right. Well, first of all, let's see why this guy is mad at us. This is SQL database. This is SQL database. What is this guy? Oh, I picked up the wrong. I picked up the wrong namespace. It's not supposed to be Cosmos. It's supposed to be SQL Server because there's two different databases here that we're working with. There you go. This one is beta. Let's go back here. All right. So the connection string part. How do we build a connection string? You know, from that. The database itself has the good stuff. This one gets a little bit icky, but bear with me. So I'm gonna go here and say private string like this and say generate connection string. So this is iSQL database I'm passing in. So this is a SQL database. And then we're going to build some stuff. I actually don't know the exact string off the top of my head. So let me go and find, let's just get the SQL database access first. That's from the configuration because we already have the configuration. Do you remember that when we said this.cloudbroker.get admin access? So this guy's going to give me the configuration. But the connection string itself that we need to build is a little bit more hectic than that. Let me go find, if you give me 1 second, you can find it anywhere really. Like if we look on Google, you can find a connection string. Here it is. I think we can do with this one. Here you go. This will work. Here we go. There you go. Right. And then I just need to put that guy in here.
Can you explain the concept of connection string? Still, I don't get it.
So when you call someone, you need to know their phone number, right?
Right.
When you call a database, you need to know the connection string.
Thank you.
The connection string basically tells you where the server is. That's the server where this database lives. And then it tells you who the database is, and then it tells you the username and password basically.
I got you.
Right? So it's like when you send someone mail. So you need to do the city name, you need to do the state name, you need to say the zip code, all of these details. That's what this guy is. Okay. So that's our SQL server. So let's go and generate. So in here, I'm just gonna go and say, okay, and then if that's the deal, then here's a generate, and I'm gonna pass in the SQL database to you. Boom, done. So it's a little complicated, so feel free to ask me any questions, but all that we've done is I got the project name, the environment, the SQL server, passed in the project name and the environment. So now I have the database name. And now I want to be able to go and create a database using my broker to communicate with the cloud. And then I'm passing in a SQL database name and a SQL server. I'm telling the people looking at the code that this is provisioned successfully. And now I'm going and saying, let's go ahead and return this. This SQL database is what we need. We're going to need down the road to be able to tell the app service to talk to the database. Again, there's different ways where you can use service principal to do that work for you, but I'm trying to kind of simplify things and make them very, very basic. Okay, so foundations, provision, SQL database. Done. Okay, this one is done. What else do we need to provision, Sally? What's missing? We're missing something. We must be, right?
App.
The app, the guy. So all of these are like support actors, except for this guy. The guy is that main actor, the app service, right? So that comes at the very, very end. We go here and say, although that we really don't need the return type, but we want to stay consistent and we want our code to be pretty. So I'm gonna go and say provision, right? Web app async. So the web app async takes a little bit more a little bit more input parameters than anything else. So it wants a project name. Okay, we know that. We want an environment. We know that, right? And then maybe we want a connection string, right?
Mm-hmm.
Connection string, sounds good. And then we want an I resource group. Okay, that's the resource group. What else do we need? We need the app service plan. And that plan is the one that we created a little bit earlier in here, right? So that's the plan. Let's go and do that. Control MO. And I'm gonna do control period, control dot. It creates the method. This method is public, should not go under private method. So I'm gonna put it up here a little bit. And then let's break down these input parameters and let's create that app. The app is where all the heavy lifting happens, but it's not gonna be too complicated, I promise you. It's just something really simple.
Why
It's
you
just,
put a beef after private? Oh, because that's private, is it?
yeah,
Okay.
this is private, it's not publicly exposed. Yeah, it makes it a lot easier to go and read the code and know what's going on, right? Okay, so we want to provision an app service, right? And we have all these crazy input parameters. Let's start with what we know. What we know so far is that we can go here and say string. This is the app name. Let's call it web app name, right? And I'm gonna go up in here and say, this is my project name, dash, I want the environment. Great. And then I'm gonna go here and say .toLower. So that's my app. Let's go here and say logging broker, log activity. This is just for visibility. And I'm gonna go here and say provisioning. And here is your web app name. Fantastic. What else? Let's actually build the thing. So web app, so this is my web app. And I'm gonna go here and say await this .cloud broker, right? And then I'm gonna go and say create web app async. Now, what does this guy need? It needs the web app name. Great. I have that. I have that information. It wants the connection string. Yes, I do. I have that information. Did I say web app or web app name? Web app name right here. Okay. What else does it want from me? Let's follow the trail here. It wants the plan. So app service plan, and it wants the resource group. Resource group like this. Done. So now it sent a message to the cloud to create that guy. Once that guy is done, I can go here and say log activity, message, like this. And I'm gonna go and say web app name, provisioned, done. What's left? Just return the web app, done. What do you think about this? Very sweet. This basically took everything we built and it sent, these are like merely just wrappers, like the foundation server is just a wrapper around what the broker is doing. The only difference here is that it just does this little naming convention thing. And then the processing service will take care of actually iterating through the environments and doing all the other magic that we're going to talk about probably tomorrow. Okay, is this enough? I don't think that's enough. We still have one more function that we need to work on, which is the deprovisioning. Do we need to deprovision every single, well, let me ask you this first. Why do we need to deprovision at all?
Because you want to, like, in the Azure, you said, I remember, you want to change the, for example, instead of cloud, you want to use something else. Yeah. That was
Right.
the,
Or let's say you have an environment that you don't need anymore. You're doing a demo, right? And you don't need that environment anymore. You should be able to go back and destroy that environment,
yeah.
right?
And basically, you just pull down the resource group of the bag.
Right. So you just take down the resource group. I don't have to deprovision each and every one of those, just the resource group, right?
Right.
Okay, if you say so, let's do that. So here's value task, doesn't really return anything. And then I'm gonna go say deprovision resource group async. Deprovision resource group async. And it takes in a project name and it takes in an environment. That's all it needs. It just needs to know which project name and which environment, and it will go find the resource group and destroy it. Let's implement that. Let's go down here. go down here and let's go and say, I want to, this is a private method as well. Yeah, this is the only private. Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's go do this, control period, implement, and now I have this method. This method is already, like it goes ahead. Okay, here we go. Deprovisioning is going to be interesting. The interesting part here is that what if you are being asked to deprovision an environment that's already deprovisioned? It doesn't exist already.
So we have to check if it is exit.
Yeah, exactly. And we already have a function for that. Do you remember? I think we built it. I hope we did. Let's see if we didn't or we did.
No, we did. We did exit.
There it is. Check
Yeah.
if group. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Nice. You're with me. You're still alive. Perfect. Okay. Okay, perfect. Perfect. So here, resource group name. It's gonna match the exact same rules that we used, and I really highly recommend that you actually do copy the exact same rules. Whatever the rules are, I want to use the exact same pattern to create the resource group like this. And then I'm gonna go here and say Boolean is resource group exist. And I'm gonna go and say await this dot cloud broker dot check resource group exists async, and then I'm gonna pass in the resource group name in there. Like this. Now we are faced with two options here. If is resource group exists, we're gonna do something. Else, I'm gonna go here and say what? I'm gonna go and say this dot logging broker, log activity, and then I'm gonna go and say message in here, and I'm gonna go and say resource group, yeah, resource group, resource group name, right? Doesn't exist. Cool. So this is me here saying there's no action, no action taken like this. I think I went way over. Let's go down here by one. So this is me saying resource group doesn't exist, no action taken. This is me basically saying I couldn't find this resource group that you're trying to deprovision. Cool. Now, why do we need that? Because sometimes once you submit in here and you say delete the div environment, it might stay in that environment. So someone else might come in and say, hey, also provision UA like this, and this guy is still sitting there. So it'll just look at this guy and say, oh, we don't need it anymore. Does that make sense? So let's go down here. Okay, so what about the deprovisioning part? It's very simple. I'm gonna go here and say, okay, this dot login broker, and then log activity, and here's your message, and here's $. I'm gonna say deprovisioning this time, deprovisioning, and then resource group name, and then dot. There you go. Okay, that's one guy. And then await this dot cloud broker dot delete resource group async, done. And then this dot logging broker log activity message like this, and I'm gonna go and say this resource group name deprovisioned.
So first you say this action is going taken, and then you said this is already done.
Yeah.
For login activity. Okay.
What happened? What's gonna happen? What happens? What's gonna happen? It happened, and then what happens, right? So okay. So let's collapse this. It looks like we have a pretty good deal here, Sally. We have a bunch of really powerful functions, bunch of capabilities that we can use here to be able to and I don't think we need that guy either in here. I don't think we need that guy either. So that should clean this up. So we can make a commit here and say foundations, right? And I can go and say deprovision resource groups, just like this. Okay, cool. So far so good, right?
Yes.
Now, now let's try to, there's only one functions left for us to kind of wrap all this up. What do you think? Should we wrap it up? Let's wrap it up. Okay. Let's go and build the processings area in this provisioning project. Processings. This processings, is also cloud managements. So I'm gonna go here and say class. And then I'm gonna go and say interface, and then I'm gonna go and say iCloud management processing service. Okay. Use cloud management processing service. And all I need to do here, this is the simplest, at least it sounds simple. All I need to do here is just expose a function that's called process async. What do you think about that? Very simple function, right? I think. Let's see what this function looks like. So let's go down here and let's create a class here called, did I create the implementation? No, I didn't. Okay, so let's go down here and say cloud management processing service. CS. Here we go. Okay. Then I'm gonna go and try to implement iCloud management processing service. Now, what does this processing service do, Sally? It will go and call the iCloud management service, so private read-only iCloud management service. That's the service that we have. Cloud management service, like this. It will also go and call the configuration broker. Do you remember that guy?
Yep.
And that guy is the guy that's going to tell us the project name and the environments that we're working with in every project. Cool. Let's create the constructor. Let's go here and say, well, this .cloud management service is just new cloud management service. And this .configuration broker is just new configuration broker. This process async is where all the magic happens, my friend. We're going to start with the provisioning. I'm going to write just really simple private async function in here that's called provision async. Okay, so value task and then provision async. And this guy takes in, that provision async guy wants in the project name. This guy's private. This is why you don't see it in the interface because it's not supposed to be exposed anyway. And then something called cloud action. Do you remember cloud action? That's the action we're taking to execute a particular operation, right? Do you remember? So cloud, yeah. So cloud action, and this cloud action is just a cloud action in here. So let me go here and just type in cloud action. Okay, perfect. Okay, you could have many environments in your settings in here. We could have div, UAT, you could have a bunch of them in here, right? We want to retrieve each and every one of these environments so we can iterate, right? So for each and every one of these environment, I want to be able to go and iterate based on that environment, right? So I'm going to go and do this. Sometimes when this guy is empty, and this is just an unfortunate thing in the serialization, if this guy is empty, it will say this whole guy is null, which becomes kind of a nightmare, kind of really painful. So I'm just going to write a simple function here, simple static function that returns a list of strings. These are the environments that I need to iterate on. And I'm just going to go and say retrieve environments like this. And these environments will take in the cloud action because based on the cloud action, I know which environments I need to destroy, right? So cloud action dot environments like this. And if these environments are null, then return just an empty list in here. See, and if the cloud action itself is null, then let's just do the Elvis notation. So if this whole statement is null, it just give me an empty list. There's just a problem in the serialization that we're kind of remedying. Not the happiest about it, but I think it could work. Okay. The rest of this is really simple. I'm going to go here and say list string environments equal retrieve environments, and I'm going to pass it the cloud action. Because based on every action, the action holds the environments, the up and down, right? So you see, every action tells me which environments I need to destroy or which environments I need to provision. Now, all I have to do is just iterate and say string environment name in environments like this. And then we're going to call all these functions that you and I built. a second ago. So I'm gonna go here and say resource group. This is the resource group that I wanted to create. Here's my resource group equal await this dot cloud management service dot provision resource group async takes in project name, environment name. Done. Just like that. Let's do the next one. So this is this guy here. Okay. Okay, this one guy. And then after that, I want what? Web app plan, I think. What was it called? Web app service plan or app service plan. Here you go. App service plan, and this is my app service plan equals await this dot cloud management service dot provision plan. And this guy takes in project name and environment name. I think it takes in the resource group as well. Perfect. Easy peasy. This guy. Done. So now it's provisioning these for every environment. It will go and create one for them, right? What else? The next one was the SQL Server. Let's go and create a SQL Server. Wait, this dot cloud management service. Provision SQL Server. Async, and this SQL Server wants what? It wants the project name, it wants the environment name, and it wants the resource group. Done. Easy. What else after the SQL Server? We want the SQL Database. And this guy is that special model. So this is SQL Database equal await this dot cloud management service dot provision SQL Database async like this. And this guy will take project name, environment, and SQL Server like this. What else is left is the web app. That's the last thing that we want to provision. So web app. So this is my web app. I don't really do anything with this one after this, but here we are. Cloud management, provision, web app async, takes in project name, takes in environment name, and it takes in database connection, which is coming from the SQL database.connection string. And it takes in resource group, and it takes in the app service plan. Done. So you see what I'm doing here? It will iterate over every environment that I have, and it will create a resource group for the environment, an app service for the environment, a SQL server, SQL database, web app, all the things that we need. Cool? Cool, right? So I can go up in here in this service, in this guy up here, and I can go and say, okay, give me my cloud management configuration. This is my cloud management configuration. I'm going to go and say configuration broker dot get configurations. And then I'm going to go here and call provision async. And provision async wants the cloud management configuration dot project name, and it wants the cloud management configuration dot up because this is the provision part. It wants these two parameters right here. Easy. This guy await. Done. Okay, so this is here cloud action. This here is project name. Like this. Why is this guy complaining? Because I don't have async, I think. There you go. Perfect. What about the environments that we want to destroy though? Let's go build that function. So I'm gonna go here and say processing. And then provision. Gonna need processing, deprovision, right? So I'm gonna go here and say private async value task deprovision async. So it will go through and iterate through all the environments that I need to destroy, right? So this cloud action again. Here's my, why do I need cloud action, Sally, to pass it in here? What do you think? You fell asleep. Okay.
No,
See?
I was I remember that
Uh,
the action is still was confused. I was confused, that's why I couldn't elaborate it. But I
okay.
remember a minute ago you mentioned it.
Okay, I'll go inside the cloud action and you tell me, what do we need? One thing. What is it?
Oh,
Mm,
yeah. So
the environments, right?
for each environment, you said we need the cloud action.
Right. So this is environments, and I'm gonna go and say retrieve environments for the cloud action. That's my cloud action here. I'm gonna go and iterate and say string environment name in environments like this. I'm gonna go and say await this dot cloud management service dot deprovision, and it wants a project name and environment name. That's it. Right? So now I can go and call this deprovision guy under process async. Await deprovision async. And here's your project name, cloud management configuration dot cloud management configuration dot project name, and then cloud action, cloud management configuration dot down, which is the environments that needs to be destroyed.
Mm.
Okay, so let's clean this solution real quick. This is kind of a 2 sessions combined. Sorry if your brain is fried, but
No, is I just like from even the last 2 sessions ago. So you mentioned about the cloud action. Still, this concept it didn't clear for me.
okay, stay with me.
No,
You can't fall asleep in my class. It's gonna be a little bit harder. Okay,
no,
sounds
it's
good.
early to sleep. It's just 9 o'clock.
All right. All right, cool. So what else is left in this whole kind of journey that we're in? The simplest thing in the world to actually execute all of that work. So we combined everything under something called process async. Now I can go to this program CS and say something as simple as I want to turn this into a task like this, asynchronous task. This is the entry point. And
Yes.
then you have this iCloud management processing service, which is the interface, cloud management processing service right here. And we're gonna just instantiate that, just a normal cloud management. And then I'm gonna go here and say cloud management processing service dot process async. And that is the provision project, my friend. Done. All the components that you may need, everything else. It's a whole full-blown project that gives you all the kind of information you need, um, to provision a resource, right? So
Mm.
I can go here and say exposer, right? Run process async, right? Okay. So I'm gonna push this guy. There's still one tiny session that we have in here to set up these actions with the cloud, right? To actually set this up with the cloud, and I'm gonna walk you through that, and I'm gonna give people the kind of details they need to kind of learn about that. Let me just go up in here and say, here's GitHub, here is our project. Here you go. And then I can go up to Sophie core. And now I think we can very easily open up a PR. So we can turn this guy into to be ready for review. Here you go. And these are all our commits right here. So this is that provision, initialize Azure, resources provision project. Okay, cool. Do you have any questions for me?
Um, you know, there was a syntax that you use quotation mark and then question mark and then double sign question mark.
Oh, it's called the interpolation.
Inter-
And this interpolation basically when you go and say, let's say deprovision resource groups. So in here, for instance, you'll see this guy. This
yeah.
guy here, right? That's interpolation. So I
No,
can place in a variable inside the string.
no, not this one. The one that you in a for each iteration. So when you use double sign. I mean question mark, not the.
Oh, the question mark. Okay. So this guy basically means if this side is null, then replace it with this guy.
Okay, double question mark means. I mean, double question means replacing. Okay,
Yeah.
this doesn't. Okay.
Only if this side is null.
Mm-hmm. This is if
And
it's.
and then this guy here is called the Elvis annotation. Huh?
this is like saying before two double question mark. It means the if the statement is no.
Yeah, if this whole statement is null, then replace it with this.
I got you. Okay. What is if I want to search more, learn about this? What is the what should I search about that? Like
There is
this.
there is the safe navigation, and there is the it's called, what's the name of it? Let's see, double question mark C#. It's called, what do they call it? They call it coalescing operator. So coalescing operator in C#. And coalescing basically means, there it is. What does that mean? It means if this guy is null, then go ahead and replace it with something else. I'm going to send you the link here in the chat so you can take a look at it.
Okay.
Cool.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect. All right, so let's go up in here. I think now is a good time for us to merge. This guy seems to pass the build. And that's my very first public provision project. I've done it a lot behind the scenes, some, tinted and private projects, but that will definitely bump my Git file up to an engineer level, which I'm really excited about.
Oh.
Okay, cool. We're good.
Thank you.
Okay, let's connect next week. Fridays tomorrow. I don't work Fridays, but I do, but I do other things. But Monday we're gonna set it up. We're gonna set up the action here to actually kick off the provisioning process, and we see these resources being built in the cloud. Sounds good?
Perfect. Thank you so much. This is the small action you said is left. Yeah.
Yep. This is the tiniest thing left that we need to add to this. Sounds good?
Perfect. Thank you so
All
much.
right. I'll talk to you later. Thanks,
Okay.
Sally. Thank
Have
you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later. Bye.